an update on the market and just a bit of a summary of how we do insurance here at Porirua.
Great, well thanks very much. I'll start off. Tony Owen's my name. I'm Deputy Managing Director at Aon. I'm based here in Wellington. I'll just give you a brief update on the market, and then Brett will take you through a little bit of detail on the program as it applies to Porirua City. So you've probably heard a lot of this in the media, but 2020 proved to be one of the most challenging years in modern history for insurance, and obviously the pandemics had a big impact on that. We continue to deal with the impacts of that, and the market also is finding it quite challenging. The main reasons for that are there have been losses overseas, which have subsequently found that there is an insurance solution for them where the insurers actually never realised at the time that they were providing any cover. So that is actually proving to be a bit of a challenge. We are seeing, however, despite all that, we are seeing the market starting to stabilise, and that is as a result of some new capital entering the global market. But the Wellington region continues to be a challenge because earthquake natural disaster capacity is still very tight, and it's obviously getting that capacity does have an impact on prices. We're also seeing some sort of cover reductions as well, insurers forcing us into situations where they won't provide what we call silent cyber, which is cyber insurance. We have a separate cyber insurance type cover, but whereas it's in other policies it was never actually disclosed, and so they're trying to remove that. And we're also seeing what we call contingent business interruption covers being removed as well. So that's where there's non-damage losses. So it remains a difficult environment, but we are starting to see signs that the market is starting to stabilise, which is good, which means it has a positive impact on in terms of pricing. So just looking at the 2020 top significant natural disasters in the region, when I'm talking the region Asia, Oceania, we've got 38% of the losses in the world. That's economic losses. About 12% of that is insured, and the reason for that is that there's a lot of losses in other parts of Asia where there is no insurance. So effectively that's why there's such a gap between the economic losses and the insured losses. There's just like more locally in Australia, there was a number of severe losses, thunderstorms and hail damage. Sydney, Brisbane, Canberra and Melbourne all struck by hailstorms, and about $1.4 billion and 131,000 claims. And locally, in the local market in 2020, we had 239 million in natural disaster claims during 2020 as well. So that's Insurance Council data. So there was quite a lot happening, and believe it or not, a lot of those losses were actually in the South Island, and particularly around. We had a lot of losses in Canterbury again with hailstorms. So that area seems to suffer a lot of regular type of losses, but not big ones. But that's what's driving the market locally. So I'll hand over to Brett now to take you through some of the more detail.
Cool, thank you.
Yep. Overseas cover that yeah, well, it's the COVID losses. Basically, what's happened is Lloyd's went to the Court of Appeal and they've lost it. And there were policies were silent, or there weren't clarity around whether pandemics were covered or not, and the insurers didn't intend to cover it, but they found that they had covered it. And we've had the same situation in Australia, which IAG, which is the holding company for NZI, have had to raise about 1.4 billion, I think, in capital, because they found they had wordings which hadn't been updated with the latest legislation, and so it left a hole in their policy, and effectively they ended up with claims which they didn't expect to cover.
All right, Brad, over to you.
Cool, thank you. So as Tony said, COVID's been a big impact on the insurance industry, and here we've just really put two views. COVID is still a live, ongoing event, so we're not at the end of it yet. The more optimistic view is that Lloyd's are expecting losses to be less than the US $100 billion they first estimated, and capital remains robust, and a number of insurers did still return profits for 2020. On the flip side, there remains significant uncertainty around those COVID losses because of the ongoing litigation throughout the courts, especially in US and Europe. So there have been a number of COVID losses paid already. It has been a very significant impact. New Zealand was largely excluded from this, as most of our insurers do exclude infectious diseases following the SARS pandemic in 2003. So the local impact has not been as severe as it has globally. The current best estimate is that losses will be in the range of 40 to 60 billion US dollars. However, some carriers are more cautious, and obviously there's still litigation going on, so it will be a number of years until we really know the full outcome of COVID on the insurance industry. There you can see the majority of claims are coming from the US and predominantly driven by event cancellation insurance. So more specifically onto Porirua's insurance program. So for your insurance purchase, you're part of the Outer Wellington Shared Services Group. That's along with Hutt City, Upper Hutt City, Kapiti Coast District and Greater Wellington Regional Councils. So we buy as a collective group up to a policy limit of $600 million for your material damage and business interruption cover. So that's effectively what we call everything above ground. We have a separate policy for the Three Waters infrastructure assets, which has a policy limit of $200 million specifically for Porirua. And we also have a third policy for your residential assets with a value of $17 billion. And that's all the residential assets that you own.
Brett, can we just pause there and take questions? Councillor Leggett.
The infrastructure assets, does that include underground?
Yes, it is. The Three Waters underground piping predominantly.
Not in the one above.
The one above can include infrastructure assets, but the one we determine as infrastructure is specifically around the Three Waters pipe network specifically.
Right, okay.
Councillor Turin.
Thank you. On those policy limits, how comprehensive are those limits in the event of a major disaster? How much coverage are we going to see with the limits in place?
Obviously, it is a shared limit between other members in the group. The limits have been tested over a number of years and are based on probable maximum loss estimates, which have been undertaken by risk engineers. So each council within the group has had assessments done on what, in the event of an earthquake event, your probable maximum loss would be. So it should be adequate for the worst case scenario. Obviously, if all 5 councils are severely damaged, there is an apportionment method if the limit is not adequate. So just material damage and business interruption cover, just as an overview, it covers physical loss to insured property by an event which is unintended and unforeseen. And for your renewal, we do ask for a schedule of all properties that you'd like covered under that policy. We do have a 36-month indemnity period for any claims in respect of additional costs which you may incur, or if you are losing rent on anything. And as we said, that $600 million limit is shared amongst all members of the Outer Wellington Group. And that is a policy which is placed with the international markets as well as local markets, and any claims are led by AIG locally. You also have quite a wide liability program. This is also bought through the Outer Wellington Shared Services Group. Your general liability, which covers public liability, which is effectively damage to third-party property, you have a limit of up to $160 million, which is quite a significant limit. Professional indemnity, which is professional negligence, you also have $160 million, so again, very, very high for the general market conditions. And then your more administrative type covers statutory liability, employer's liability, and haul hires liability. Slightly lower limits there, but in turn with market standards. And then we've just given a brief overview of what each of these policies covers. Statutory liability covers claims arising from allegations of breach of statute. Employer's liability for claims by employees for damages as a result of personal injury which are not covered by ACC, and hall hires liability. Obviously, you have a number of properties which you rent out to the community. This just provides a cover for them if they cause damage to your property, so they're not going and needing to source their own liability cover. And you also have quite a wide range of other policies. Cyber, I suppose, is the most topical one there at the moment, where you have a limit of $1 million for any cyber breach. You also have crime, motor vehicle, personal accident, travel, fine art, and a timber policy for the Spicer Forest.
Can I just ask a question with the cyber? Doesn't seem to be $1 million. I mean, I'm thinking of the Waikato situation. Is $1 million cover, not now relevant? I mean, it should be more.
We can certainly look at increasing it. Obviously, cyber is an area where claims are just growing exponentially globally. The impacts of the Waikato DHB are still unfolding. I don't believe they had any insurance in place, but it is probably an area that we could look at for increasing. And that's obviously a policy which will respond to both first and third party losses. So the costs you incur as a result of a cyber breach, as well as any liability you have through that, through a security event or privacy event.
Sorry, Brett, carry on.
There is also a policy for crime, which covers theft or dishonesty by your employees, motor vehicle, which I'm sure everyone is aware with, personal accident for elected members and the executive team. We also have a cover for fine arts around the artwork in the Pātika Museum, and rotation timber and carbon policy for the Spicer Forest. So that was a very quick overview. Sorry, we were under time pressure, but if there's anything more, please reach out.
Chief Executive, I think you had a comment to make.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, Councillor Morell, about the cyber issue. We are bringing a paper back to the next Audit and Risk Committee about our assurance processes that we are working on currently around just that issue. And insurance is, of course, the final issue that you might want to consider in all of that, but it's relevant for that discussion.
Councillor Terlin.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that there wasn't any mention around climate change, and I was wondering what sort of market trends we can see or expecting to see in the insurance industry as a result of climate change, and what impact that's likely to have on PC.
Insurers are obviously very aware of climate change and they are monitoring it. Climate change for gradual deterioration is not something which will be covered by an insurance policy, but the sudden events we are seeing are being covered. The increasing frequency and severity of weather events are having an impact on the insurance industry. It's obviously pushing up the claims costs, which will have an on-flow to the availability of insurance and also premium impacts. So insurers are very carefully watching climate change.
We'll just add to that insurers are looking at specific areas, and while we haven't seen huge withdrawal of insurance, we are starting to see it in some areas, particularly where is subject to regular sort of sea surge events, particularly on the east coast of parts of the Hawke's Bay and places like that, where there are some residential properties. So we are starting to see that. We haven't seen any major change in attitude from insurers on sort of general flood risk or anything like that at this stage, but I think it's something that we're constantly looking to monitor.
And just following up on that, so has there been any work done so far, or do you have any view on what the likely impact is likely to be on premiums and cost for council in the medium term in particular, I guess, as costs go up as a result of the increase in those disasters?
We don't see any significant impact on the councils in this group in the immediate future as a result of climate change. We see our biggest driver in this region is obviously an earthquake, and that's what drives the premium. That's probably 80 to 90% of our premium cost for this region. We have a specialist in our office who's doing a lot of work at the moment on climate change, and he's been engaged by some clients to do some work on that. and there'll probably be some work done around the local authority areas as well, which once we get that underway, we'll be able to share that with you.
Can I ask, Tony, what's the current view of the international market for the New Zealand earthquake risk? You know, we saw quite an adverse reaction following the sort of the big earthquakes, you know, a few years ago.
It's highly cautious would be the answer to that. We don't really need to have another major event in the short term. It's proved, I mean, Kaikoura proved to be quite challenging because of the impact it had on Wellington. And Wellington area is in the sights the whole time. So effectively the cost of reinsurance for all the New Zealand insurers is driven by a Wellington earthquake event. And that also impacts on the likes of the Vero and IAG Group, which are both Australian operated, and their biggest single event that they use for buying their reinsurance is a Wellington earthquake event. So it does have a big impact on the premiums. Probably it is the biggest single impact that we deal with.
Any further discussion? All right. Well, thank you very much, Tony and Brett. As Alison said, very timely, very informative session, and we look forward to welcoming you back sometime in the future to the Audit and Risk Committee. So thank you very much, and we'll let you depart for the balance of your day. Thanks. All right, so the motion to receive the report and the verbal update for information has been put and seconded. We've had the discussion, so all those in favour, contrary carried. Thank you. Right, agenda item 6.2, health and safety, another staple on this committee, another very important agenda item. And again, I have pleasure in moving that we receive the report for information. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mayor. It's been moved and seconded. Now open for discussion. Jerry, can I pass to you to just briefly introduce your paper and comments before we open it up for discussion?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is the report for the 31st of March. It's been a pretty good quarter. We've run a couple of external audits, one in the Works Depot there for hazardous substances, which we passed, and also a pool safe audit. We've got some pretty good feedback on that. The other thing I'd probably draw your attention to is we've talked to our external contractors about provision of a bit more information in their reports, and in particular ask them to not just tell us where there's been an incident or an accident, but to include what steps have been taken to address that. So the quality of that reporting has got quite a bit better. So I think that's all.
All right, open for discussion. Mayor.
Yeah, sorry, Jerry, just one question. Like, what, it's probably external contractors, but what happens when we have, like in Whitby, where we had the 4 incidents on one footpath, where people fell, were taken to hospital, needed stitches? We don't really record those, do we, unless they get reported somehow in the system? Because I think those sort of things are obviously slipping through, because we had someone else break their arm the other day on a footpath, and I just don't know if these are actually coming back to us.
I'm actually not too sure myself. I might have to ask my health and safety person.
So the report that we provide here is mainly focused on staff and things that are reported through our internal reporting software. The external things that happen with members of the public on footpaths and things get recorded through our CRM process through the contact centre, and then, you know, put out to whoever needs to make those repairs.
Can I ask, is that something that the committee, perhaps not on a each meeting basis, but once or twice a year, have some sort of report from that process?
It would be interesting if we could, but I don't want to push you into too much more work.
Right.
But,
Yep.
We'd be happy to report on that, but it would be pretty incomplete picture because people fall and trip, and my own partner broke an ankle and certainly didn't report it to the council, did it in a park. So I don't think it would be a very complete picture, but we can certainly let you know what we know about, but it's a little bit unclear about how that would help. So we certainly do try and fix whatever the issues are if people have been injured about what has been reported to us. But if you're trying to get a picture of the whole city and the incidents of accidents in the public arena, I don't think it would provide that.
Okay, no, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any Councillor Leggett?
No, I completely agree with you, Wendy, but I guess the point is, which you were trying to make, is that we just need to be sure that when those incidents happen, like you said, 4 incidents, was that the same?
It was the same path, but they didn't do anything. And then when they told me, we had it fixed the next day. So it was purely because people are not reporting things. So it's actually not us doing anything wrong. Yeah.
No, I guess the key thing is to fix it when it does happen. That's, yeah, okay.
All right, no further discussion on health and safety. All right, it's been moved and seconded that we note this report for information. So all those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Right, our next agenda item is the update on the long-term plan. As we sit here on the 17th of June, 13 days to go for the finalisation. It's been on our agenda for near on 18 months now, important topic. Thank you very much for the report. So we're being asked to receive this report for information and also note the progress that's been made on the long-term plan. So I'm happy to move in that direction, seconded by Councillor Terlin. Discussion, please. Have we got Nick next here? Yes. Would you like to speak briefly to the report and perhaps update it since it was first written, Nick? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. And as you so aptly remind us, we've got 13 days to go to get it completed. So the report indicates that we're on track to delivering a final version to you by the 30th. I will get Joe's team, if they want to talk to you in any detail about the changes to the rate levels and the finances, how that's playing out now. They can probably pass that on to you. And all I would say is that the hot review for audit is happening on Friday rather than the scheduled Wednesday. That's the only change in the program. Otherwise, we are now in the finessing of the writing and landing on the rates level. So I might hand over to Joe if you want to speak to the rates levels.
Thank you, Joe.
So through deliberations, the rates came out at the average is 7.77. After we've actually been through deliberations, we do go back to QV for the latest growth figures, and our growth figures are higher than what we modelled. So our average rate increase now is 7.65. And the split across the areas through the consultation, residential was 8.04 after the final 7.98. Rural was 16.66 after taking in growth. It's now 15.26%, so that was a decrease of 1.4. The only one that's moved slightly is motels, moved slightly up, and everyone else has moved in the range of 0.06% to a 1.13% decrease from what we forecasted through deliberations, and that is mainly, it's all driven by the growth numbers coming through because we use a set of 1%.
Thank you, Joe. Can I... Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, look, thanks. Nick mentioned the hot review on page 19, item 24, the 3 focus areas. It seems like a huge waste of council money since the auditor already noted that it's not unique to Porirua and that doesn't raise any concerns with EY. So I can't understand the point of the hot review. Can somebody explain that to me?
This is so Ernst & Young are appointed by the Office of the Auditor General. The Office of the Auditor General have particular areas they review each year and each LTP, and they identify the areas where they think across New Zealand it is of significance. And these are the areas that they've identified.
Can I ask just along the same lines, Nick, I think it was scheduled for that to be done or started today. You're now saying Friday. How many days does this take? Is this going to cause us some issues with our deadline?
I'm not going to lie, it's not easy to balance the needs of EY and getting the document finished, but we will do what we have to do to make it work.
Thank you, Councillor Trillin.
Thank you. If in the circumstances where, as a result of the changes we made to the LTP at deliberations and the final audit that's done, if there are any changes that need to be made, what's the process that we go through to address those needed changes?
I'm not sure what you mean. There is very little room for any policy changes or any budget changes at this point. All the changes that the team are working through now are largely technical. They're things like the growth figures. So landing amendments at the final meeting is not doable because we won't be able to strike the rates if that occurs.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't mean amendments. It was more. So I noted that at 15, any final decisions by council on recommendations will be incorporated during the preparation of final LTP. Sorry, this is at 15, and then the final LTP will undergo an audit. So I'm wondering more if, as a result of the changes that we already made during our deliberations, if anything comes up in that final audit. I just recognise we're moving in quite a tight time frame now. What's the process in addressing those issues that would come up?
There generally aren't changes. There sometimes are wording changes from auditors. I'm looking around at the auditors in the room somewhat desperately because this is not a process I'm particularly au fait with. But my experience of long-term plans is the final step between the deliberations that you have done and the sign-off by council at the final meeting, for us it's the 30th of June, is they are things that Graham Grieve does in the background, works all those figures through, all the decisions that you've made through. There's a few checks that we make, and then we have to go through the audit process. But the auditors have been part of this all the way through, so they're inclined, there's a reducing number of factors that can be changed at this final step, and hopefully none. That's what we always hope for, but often they're wording and they're detail attention things that, but they're more of a technical nature. You should be able to be assured that whatever decisions you made at the deliberations have been captured in the numbers, and we're pretty careful about all of that.
Can I just have a follow-up question to you, Nick? When you made comment there about the auditors, I would have asked this question of them if they were in the room, but they're not. Do I sense that they're on time frame? Are they indicating to you that they're going to meet their timetable?
Yes, I'm going to hand you over to Jo, who's desperately wanting to answer your question. So I'm going to leave her to do that.
So we got, for last night, Grant sent me to say we're all on track with the audit. I think the only thing we've got is now the infrastructure strategy, which is the last minute change where we grossed it up. And we'd expect after the hot review, which will be, we'd expect to know Friday afternoon if there's anything more. But all the things from EY is all on track.
So you'll know Friday afternoon if there's any issues coming out of the hot review.
Well, that would be our thinking, unless something across it'd be across the sector if the OAG has anything particular, which we can't control that bit.
Councillor Leggett.
So on that note, I just wanted, because my understanding was when they've spoken to us before, auditors, particularly about our Three Waters forecast and our capital program, we were pretty well positioned. And so I just wonder whether we believe that there is, do we understand that there's anything possible that might come out of this which would cause us to make it a bit of a snag, and that we'd have to go back and think a bit more deeply about some of the issues?
I don't think so. All of the issues that were highlighted in the draft stage, I think are still there. The doability of the infrastructure spend, because the sector has had a huge uplift in investment in Three Waters, and I think that's probably a growing concern, whether that gets some more attention, but that is a sector-wide issue. So I don't know if you want to add.
Right, no, you don't have to add to it. I mean, I thought these were all sector-wide issues, except for perhaps if I don't know what they're going to do in terms of growth forecasts. If you wanted to question some of our growth forecasts, for example, then that may have an impact on things going forward.
I don't think they'd be questioning our growth forecast. Our numbers are based on the QV, the latest QV, and it's in line with our growth strategy. And they would have, if there was an issue with that, I would have expected that had been picked up as part of the before the consultation document went out.
Perhaps I could just summarise, if that's all right, through you, Chair. It'll be sector-wide issues that won't be expected to be resolved just by us, I suspect, and it'll be an overarching comment that's made as part of the audit. But I think Joe's right. Any material or foundational aspects that the LTP's built on would have emerged by now. Yeah.
All right, excellent discussion. If there's no further discussion on that, we've moved and seconded this report for our information and noting the progress. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. We wish you luck for the next 13 days, sort of to bring that piece of work home. So, good luck. Agenda item 6.4, the Treasury Investment and Liability Management Quarterly Update. Again, this committee's been asked to receive the report for information, so I'm happy to move in that direction. Do I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Graham Mitchell. Thank you. We have a paper, so thank you, Zach, for the presentation of that paper. Would you like to briefly just address the key issues in it, or Joe? No.
Through you, Chair. So this is our second quarterly update around Treasury or Investment and Liability Management. So this is one of the changes as a result of our recent update, that we will bring quarterly an update around our Treasury Management. The report relates to 30th of April 2021. So we are fully compliant with our Treasury protocols as of that date. The big kind of point or area to note is that the current modelling is based off our operative long-term plan, being the 2018 long-term plan. As of the 1st of July, when the 2021 long-term plan is operative, we will then obviously change our modelling. It's a nature around Treasury that we can use the current operative policy, so there will be some changes. Our modelling that we do behind the scenes does run different scenarios, so it is something we are working on to understand, but the subsequent update will obviously provide you an update. On the second page, or page 25, there are some key takeaways from our Treasury management. What we're working to do with PwC is have a consistent presentation. So there'll be an updated format for the next Treasury meeting. And then from there, every subsequent update should look identical. So in terms of understanding going forward, should be a lot easier. And what we've tried to include there is a key of some of the key points, because Treasury is quite a complex and technical nature. So just to provide some background. Thank you.
Open for discussion. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, look, item 14 in the key at the bottom there, it tells us there's exposure to interest rate risk is managed and mitigated through the risk controls limits below. But I didn't see any below.
Through you, Chair, my apologies, the table is now above it, so that should read above.
Zach, can I make a comment? I know this whole presentation is evolving and it's changed from what we saw at the last meeting, so thank you for that. Speaking personally, I would find it helpful if there was a brief summary as to what the policies are in this area. You know, we sort of have these ticks that we're in compliance with the policies, but, you know, and I'm sure I could go and find those, but it would be useful if you can sort of briefly summarise them on this table. And looking at the interest rate risk, the numbers that we've got there, the weighted average of 6.1, that just applies to the fixed rate instruments. So am I correct in assuming there's 64 million of floating rate instruments there, which we don't have details of what the weighted average interest on that is?
Through you, Chair, so the 6.1 relates to actually the length of our debt that we've drawn down, so the length of the actual interest rate itself. The notional difference between the 151,500 and 87 is floating. So we hedge parts of our portfolio to mitigate any risk of interest rates going up or down. If you look at the graph, the pretty graph that has multiple lines called interest rate risk timeline, what that does is the grey step one at the bottom is our minimum, the red being the maximum, and we try and hold our interest rate strategy somewhere in between there to protect us. It's obviously a moving object and not an inexact science, because if we could do that, we'd probably all be stock traders rather than working at council. But that's for the policy list. So yes, your thinking is correct.
So, you know, I think if you're looking at or together with PwC looking at sort of updating this, perhaps some information around that floating rate debt would be of interest. So, but nice work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Right, agenda item 6.5, the Waka Kotahi investment audit findings. The Audit and Risk Committee has been asked to receive this report for information and note the management action being undertaken to address the issues. So I have pleasure in moving that direction. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor. It's been moved and seconded, open for discussion. Andrew, are you going to speak briefly to this paper and this exercise?
Through the chair, we've got Daryl here, our transport manager, so Daryl can briefly speak to it.
Thank you, Daryl.
Good morning, through you, Chair. Very simply, we've had a good improvement to date. It was a snapshot in time. If we were audited in the very near future, I'd expect there's probably only data quality that wouldn't go up again. We do want to see essentially all green next time, if at all possible.
Councillor Leggett.
So, through you, Chair, Daryl, so what's the issue with data quality?
It's all the data essentially collected through RAM. There's just so much of it, and it's been around for so long, and it's purely going through and finding what's relevant and what's not, and correcting some. But there's so much data of it.
Yeah, as soon as you mentioned RAM, I understand.
Councillor Tarrant.
Thank you. Yes, so obviously almost all of these trends here are positive, with the only one that's not being positive around financial processes. And I was wondering if you could just speak briefly to some improvement needed there.
Through you, Chair. Sorry for omitting that. In the financial processes, there was two relatively minor matters that were raised up. One was the number of journals that were being processed, and the finance team are addressing that. And the second one was there was a historic 2.5% admin rate. That was acceptable to Whakakatahi 5 or so more years ago, and that should have been taken out, and it hadn't been. And again, finance, we've got a process in place, so that'll be changed by 1 July. So they're both relatively minor, but they shouldn't have been there.
Certainly from my point of view, in summary, I think this is a great outcome. There's been, on most of those categories, a movement of 2 steps up the chain, and I think this is a great outcome. So perhaps we can sort of complete the loop at a future meeting and just come back to say that the issues have been dealt with. Can I ask a question? Does this impact at all on the funding that we've been sort of notified recently from them? Does it have either negative or positive impact?
Through you, Chair. If we were down in the red consistently, it could, it would. It would be the lack of confidence in what we did. But the recent funding is not, it's across the board. So it's not reflected on this. Sorry, what I did fail to highlight, sorry if I can, is we're now back on a 3-year cycle for procedural audit and probably a 4 or 5 year cycle for technical. Whereas after the previous one in 2018, they came back obviously 18 months.
All right, we can record our congratulations. Well done, very timely with this funding round that we were able to sort of get it back up into the yellow and the green category. No further discussion. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Right, agenda item 6.6, the interim audit status update. We've got a report on that which we've been asked to receive for our information. I'm happy to sort of move in that direction. So do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Moved and second. Joe, do you want to briefly speak to this paper, please?
I'll ask Peter to come forward. She's just recently been appointed as the Manager of Financial Services.
Thank you. Welcome to the table, Peter.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So we've just had our interim audit update. We've got auditors here today to help update us on that. The paper, it has a key red, orange and green. That's the key at the top. We don't have any in the red at the moment. The paper indicates that most of our areas, the ones in orange, they're actually in progress when this report was completed. So the auditors may be able to update us on some of those areas.
Thank you, Peter. Welcome to Casey and Sid from EY. Welcome to the Audit and Risk Committee. Any additional comments from those of Peter on the interim audit?
I'll just go through the ones marked in orange. The development contribution levies, this is more of an audit finding from last year. So we had recommended a change in the accounting treatment of DAs and DCs. That was agreed upon last year and is still being worked through by Zach. So as at the interim, we still haven't got a confirmation on what changes. Moving on to the tendering process, I can confirm that we have received all the information that we needed to subsequent to this report. The same with financial statement closing process, so we can mark that green. Moving on to the infrastructure asset valuation. We had received the valuation report from AECOM when we were here for the interim. We have reviewed the report and communicated a list of requirements and questions that we have for the valuer. Graham has communicated that on forth to the valuers, and we are still waiting on a response. So we anticipate that this will be cleared when we are back for the year-end audit. For the IT processes, the IT team has made good progress since this report date, and they expect to have their final findings report by the end of this month. So not too far away.
Thank you for that update. So I sort of take from that you're sort of positioned pretty well to head into the year-end audit, which
Absolutely, yes.
year-end again only being 13 days away. So
yeah.
All right. No further discussion. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. Wish you luck with the final audit process coming up. So agenda item 6.7, strategic risk update. Thank you, Alison, for the paper. We, the committee, have been asked to receive this report for information. So I'm very happy to sort of move in that direction. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Taran. So open for discussion. Alison, can I pass to you for a brief introduction of this paper?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll just talk straight to the heat map on page 3 of the document, but take it largely as read. So obviously in the sort of 3, 4, 5 months prior, we had the risk workshop with elected members, which for me personally was very beneficial in sort of weighing that up against what we have here. I like to sort of think of the top risks as a collective view, not really as rated. So I think, you know, that we had good coverage between what came out of that workshop and what we already had here. And after discussion at ELT, we have sort of made a few changes. We've brought in a new risk around sector change, just to take in all the sort of reform, RMA, local government review things that are going on at the moment. We've sort of dropped the recession GFC risk back down onto the heat map. Infrastructure prioritisation failure, we've dropped that off. That risk is sort of, it's reduced, but it's also kind of morphed into that new sector change one. And then there's a couple of others, obviously, that I'll just keep an eye on. The one around technology, cyber is obviously quite topical, and I will have a bit of updating in the risk details around that because we are doing quite a bit in the cyberspace around controls there. And then the only other things really that I'll be keeping an eye on is in that sort of risk to watch, the service delivery failure. I think that one with I think the increased spending required, and then with the challenges around supply chains and contractors, that will be just one to watch there. Happy to take any questions on anything else in there.
Discussions, Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks. Through you, Chair. The page 53, major infrastructure failure. We've got at the end of the first line, forced revocation without adequate condition review. Is that really a risk?
It's a shame Daryl's not here to talk to that one, actually. I don't, well, look, it's not one that's an immediate risk. I think that from what I can gather, that can sort of take 10 years to actually come to fruition. So it could be if they didn't adequately consult, I guess, with us on it, but I don't think it's a high risk.
The one to that was page 56 in the Appendix A, the likelihood and consequences definitions. Under the financial heading, in the minor column, we say direct loss or increased cost of up to $500,000 is considered minor. Is that correct?
It's, look, this hasn't been reviewed for a couple of years, and it's actually on my audit program to review it this year, and I'm happy to take those limits to ELT for a discussion on whether we think that those are still relevant. They are just a guideline for kind of assessing risk, and that can be subjective, so yeah.
Alison, can I ask a question? I personally find this heat map very informative and very sort of helpful. With the new one that added in there, sector change uncertainty, is it possible to look at unpacking that a bit? Because there's a lot in that, and they're sort of quite discrete sort of items in there. You know, there's the RMA, there's the water reform, there's the possibility of amalgamation. You know, it sort of goes on, and you know, it's just sort of covered in one box there.
Yes, we definitely can. You know, it's quite a new one. Obviously, there's not a lot of detail that I've put in there, and I think we'll understand more as those ones, you know, we get more information on them. But yeah, we can definitely look at providing and unpacking those a bit.
No further discussion. It's been moved and seconded that we receive this report for information. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you, Alison. The Risk and Assurance Quarterly Update, agenda item 6.8. Here we've been asked to also receive the report for information, but in addition to that, to approve the 21-22 audit plan. So I'm happy to move in that direction. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mayor. Moved and seconded. Open for discussion. And again, Alison, if you can just briefly talk to this and also your audit plan, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, key things about this one is that the scheduled work for this 12 months is now largely complete. And then really I'm just looking for sign-off for my 12-month program. And so a couple of comments on that one. Just around the audits, just a bit more detail really. The Food Act QMS is just a short piece of work I do for the environmental health team, which looks at their quality management system, and that helps them with their accreditation that they're required to get. I've also put in there some health and safety site audits, so that's where I'm collaborating with Jerry's team and just going to do sort of a site audit a quarter around council just to get a bit more assurance around compliance with health and safety. Which I think will be quite valuable. And then the only other thing to note really is that Wendy talked about we want to start doing some more cyber reporting, so that'll come up, is that, you know, doing the insurance stuff might provide a bit of challenge on meeting the plan, but I may outsource some parts of the audit work if and when I need to, but I'll update on how that's going obviously when I give my progress updates. Happy to take any questions on anything else in there.
Questions, discussion on the update or the plan? Everybody comfortable with the plan?
Yeah, the cyber report that Wendy spoke to will obviously be of great interest. It's the number one issue on most audit committees that I attend, so that report will be received with interest.
Can I just ask, Alison, there's enough room in your plan for, you know, any necessary work on the move to the new datascape?
Yeah, you'll see in there I've put a big line through because that's not yet defined. But what I'm thinking around that is my work personally will just be looking at any areas that are manual controls as a base, as you know, in terms of processes that aren't quite complete yet. So anywhere we're putting in manual controls, that's where I'll be interested in. EY will also be doing some sort of migration testing work around there, but I'll work with them on how that looks. But it is definitely a priority to do that.
Thank you for that. No further discussion. It's been moved and seconded that we receive the report for information and that we approve the 21-22 audit plan. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you for that. Talking about Datascape, update, agenda item 6.9. Thank you, Joe and team, for the report. We're being asked to receive the report for information. Happy to move in that direction. Do I have a seconder, please, for that? Thank you, Councillor Duncan. It's been moved and seconded. Joe, can I ask you briefly to introduce the report, please?
Through the Chair, this report was at 30 April, so we're now mid-July. You'll see on this report, June.
You're getting ahead of yourself.
I feel very comfortable now. Mid-June. So where we're sitting, so you'll see that it's amber and there's red in this report for finance property, which is a go-live schedule. That is now green. So the go-live schedule for finance property rating and the digital front counter is 1 October. And we are currently going through user acceptance testing at the moment. We are still finalising the regulatory schedule is amber. We're still working through the timing of the regulatory schedule, but the key dates are a soft, which this report says is there'll be a soft go live at 1 July, which will look at some reporting because our report, and that will test our data migration. We are running rates through Tech 1 because we do not want to put the revenue at risk. But we will be doing a parallel run in Datascape to make certain that the answer we get in Tech 1 is the answer we get in Datascape. With the staff training through August and 4th of October is the go live for finance, property and rating and the digital front counter.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions on that. The first one, page 64 in the project summary, the contract arrangements between Datacom and Council are still in legal review. Is that a worry?
It would be ideal that we did have a contract, but our relationship is a strategic partnership, and a lot of that, the reason why it's still in review is the finalisation of the statement of work, because we went into a strategic partnership with Datacom where they were developing the software at the same time, and we were the trial. And the other is the getting the regulatory schedule, so we can tie it to the regulatory schedule, so we can tie the contracts.
Follow on from there. The financials, am I right in calculating that we're 160,000 over budget so far? And is the budget open-ended on this?
We are over on the budget. We're re-looking at a reprioritisation within the the business technology group to fund that. So we are working through the budget issues.
Final one. Go live set for the 1st of October for customer services. I get the impression that go live for complete is still quite some time away. Is that the case? Are we fine with Datascape to cover us for all that time?
So the risk of doing a big go live was what we worked through. So we concentrated on finance and rating and my Porirua and the customer front counter, and we need those to be able to work into the regulatory model. And now we're working through the regulatory model in that Datacom have come back with the dates that will all be there in March. It's whether the ability of the business to be able to consume that much in one go. There's other things that, for example, the IONS audit for building control, we must be in a static environment with no major changes for 6 months before that review. So that again would push out building consents, and building consents is also run on a separate system from Tech 1. So our focus has been on exiting Tech 1 and then looking at the other systems after that. What we will see is we have bought software as a service, and the advantage of software as a service, it's like what you see with Microsoft. You use Microsoft 365, you no longer have these big updates. It constantly does releases in the background. And that's one of the things we're actually testing as we go through UAT, is the ability to be able to operate in an environment in a live, well, we're not in a live, we're in the test environment, but we're simulating the live environment with ongoing releases.
All right, no further discussion. Congratulations, Joe and team. A lot of movement on this particular item. and it's very heartening to see that we're starting to get some green on our heat maps in this project. So, we wish you well for the go live, which no doubt we'll get a report on at our next meeting. So, thank you. No further discussion. It's been moved and seconded that we receive this report for information. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. Agenda item 6.10, 6-monthly legislative compliance survey results. Here we are being asked to receive the report for information and note the survey results. So I'm very happy to move in that direction. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Mayor. It's been moved and seconded. Open for discussion. Again, Joe, will you speak briefly on that? Is one of your areas too?
So every, through the chair, every 6 months we complete comply with. So it's a internal self-assessment of our compliance with legislation. It's very pleasing to see that all the response that we got, everyone responded. We've had, we reduced the number of questions because we did find that some were repetitive. And we have identified where we've got full compliance, partial compliance, which you'll see which is improved from 7 to 4, from 7 partial in September 2020 to 4 in March 21, and the details of that's attached. We have identified one issue of non-compliance and obligations. It's around the rates rebates. We've identified that our system does not, Technology One, which is our existing IT system, does not comply with this, but we have not been able to identify a situation when this actually arose. But it's to be clear that, and I think that's actually a really good thing that we're actually looking at our core systems and identifying those. But through that period, we've not identified that obligation actually arose.
Councillor Turin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so specifically in relation to the table at 7 around the Building Act 2004 and consent numbers being on the high side, could we have some more information around to what extent this is an issue and how bad that issue is, and in addition to that, to what extent seeking an additional staff member is going to mitigate that problem, and will this still likely be a problem even with an additional staff member?
Can I just clarify, you're asking about building consents? Yes. So we have been a person down, and we're confident that with another officer on board, that will balance the flow of consents that we have today. And if we get a slight increase, if we get more building consents coming in when some of the big developments come, it's likely we will have to respond as numbers of consents increase. It is a cost recovery recipe, which we look at and monitor constantly, but we're comfortable based on what's happening at the moment and likely in the next year to 2 that will be about the right configuration.
Councillor Morrell.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question, as what was along the lines of mine. We at one stage previously we were outsourcing this, or we were doing work on behalf of other councils. Where are we at with that? Because I would have thought that the regionalisation of why we're all holding hands together and lovey-dovey, that there might be some areas that we could, just help each other in the region. Because the contractors obviously, they're keen to get on with the work, and delays like this, and this is the feedback we get. They always blame council. I know that's not always correct, but they always say that there's a long delay. So is there any sort of regionalisation or something coming up in that area?
Good question, Ewan. So just firstly, we do have Comply With, who's an agency that we can pass on to do consents. We have had feedback from customers that they don't always get good service from Comply With. So we've had customers requesting that we process them, hence wanting to keep keep utilising our own resources. So that is an option, but it's not a great one at the moment. The entire industry is strained, is the reality of it, and it's not common that other councils have capacity or that we have capacity to take on board. The vehicle is there to help each other process consents, and we're all in contact enough that if we've got capacity to do that and help our neighbours, we can, and it's quite a simple thing to implement. We haven't been doing it for Tauranga and the North for quite some time, but the reality is it's a strained industry with very limited resource to buy in. We're often all competing for similar people.
Can I comment, and based on my experience, I think this is an excellent initiative by the council to run this annual or semi-annual event and working with Comply With. I'm aware that it's not consistently used throughout the local government sector, and I think it's a really good discipline. And as you can see from the sort of the output, it does highlight some areas that need attention. So. Congratulations on this work. I think it's doing its job, and excellent discussion on that. So any more discussion on this agenda item? There being none, it's been moved and seconded that we receive the report for information, and we noted the survey results. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. I now move that this meeting goes into public excluded. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Duncan. It's been moved and seconded that we move into public excluded session. All those in favour, please say aye.